Hi, my name is Karim Kamal Zahir, and I'm going to be showcasing my chat app that I have created in Flutter using Firebase, Firestore, and Firebase Cloud Messaging. And this is for my internship with unique interns. In this application, I used the Firebase for the authentication. When it comes to authenticating users, I used Firestore database in order to store user information as well as the messages between users. And finally, I used the Firebase cloud messaging to handle push notifications, to send notifications to and from users when a message is sent. So here is the application on the right, which I'm going to be testing right now, uh, or showcasing. First of all, let's register. Let's create a new user. Let's create this as tester user, for example, add gmail.com, and the username as tester user. And I'm going to type two different passwords just to showcase the error handling. Here we go. Passwords don't match. Okay. Let's type ones that match now. Test. Perfect. If I press register, it will register the account and it will be created on the database as well as in the Firebase authentication. As you can see here, the homepage lists the other users for the application, in which I can test on other users to send them notifications. Now, first, I'm going to be showcase the this is the main jar for the function where I could navigate to the home page like this, or go to the settings page and change between dark mode and light mode. And if I go to a chat, for example, I will go to test12, this username. I can type something here. For example, I'm going to type hi, send it. It sends the message showcasing the time at which that message was sent, as well as the actual date in which it was sent. And this message is automatically sent to the user logged in to that account. Um, okay. Uh, Now, I want to also showcase what would happen if I received a notification. So I will send a notification right now while the application is closed. As you can see, I will send it from my other device. And it should arrive. Yep, here we go. Now that the message has arrived, I can press on it and it's going to load me into the app and open up the chat showing me the received output. I also made it so when I get, uh, after sending multiple messages, like so, where eventually, yep, it auto scrolls to the bottom in order to always have the latest messages showing. So this is basically the most part of the application, how you can chat with and receive notifications and messages, and how those messages are stored between you and the other user. And if you log in again with the other users, where I can do that right now, to log out, as you can see. Now I can go in with the other user. Okay, I think it's missing. Yeah, here we go. Now that I'm within the other user, I could just go to the test user, and as you can see, it's the other side of the conversation. And that's basically the functionalities for this application. And of course, I made it also so when the user logs out, the device token is removed from the database because the database stores the token in which the device is on. So when the user logs out, I made it so that token is removed. So if he logs in with another account, he doesn't receive notifications based on his old account that was stored on this device. Okay, that's basically it when it comes to the application and how it works. I'm going to now showcase how I implemented this in Flutter. Here on the left, I'm going to go to first the main dot dot, which is basically the starting point of the actual project. First, I name a background message handler, which handles any messages that run while the application is in running on in the background instead of actual foreground, which is when the application is on. I also initialize the app in the main function and wait until it's ensured that it's initialized, and also await the Firebase messaging instance to get any initial messages. So if I open the application with a message, this get initial message calls back this message in order to handle it. And also the Firebase messaging on background message it handles the background messages. And I run my app. And here again in my app, I open the auth page, which I'm going to be showing off in a second. Now, if I go, and of course, I also made it a consumer where it will use the theme provider, which is a change notifier, like I used in my previous applications, where I use this provider to get the theme data for either is it light mode or dark mode. And here is the Firebase options folder, which isn't a folder that I've edited in. This is a default folder that is automatically constructed once you add your project to your, or connect your project to Firebase. And now moving on to the themes part. Here is the definition for the theme data for dark mode with the colors that I'm going to be using. Same goes for light mode over here. And finally, here is the theme provider, which acts as a change notifier, which notifies the application for any changes when it comes to the theme if it's toggled between light mode and dark mode. As you can see here, I set the getters for the theme data, the getters for a boolean to check if it's dark mode or not in order to check which state it is. I also created the theme data in order to set specific data, the toggle to toggle the themes, and also I created a save theme, which I'm going to be showcasing right here, which basically saves that theme to like to be in your device. So every time you close and reopen the application, you still will be using the same theme. So if you're using dark mode, you will still be using dark mode. I did this using the shared preferences package, which basically just saves and checks which mode it is. It sets the string at either if it's dark mode, it would set it dark mode. If not, it would set it as light mode. Anyways, moving on, there's also the load theme, which is called once a theme the theme provider is actually constructed, which loads the theme from those shared preferences to check if the user had it set as dark mode or if the user had it set as light mode. Okay, now let's move on to the pages that I used. Now, starting off, I will go through the login uh, page, which basically uses a few functions in order and uses the auth service in order to connect to and the notification service as well to connect to the Firebase database and log in or log out the user accordingly, or log in, sorry. So here, for example, I made it a stateless widget and defined the email and password controller for logging in, where and also having an on tap function for uh tap it, like the what would happen if I tap the sign up function. And moving on. Here, I define the login function, which creates an instance of the auth service as well as the notification service. In this login function, first it tries in to sign in the user with email and passwords, and if it's okay, it would request the permissions, which I'm also going to be showing for the notification service, and getting the user token, which I'm also going to be going over. If not though, if something happens, it would catch those errors and display them in a show dialog with the text okay, as I showed in the sign up page. Here is the building for the actual code for the login page, and basically, sorry, what it does is I set the background color and the customizations that I need, and then I have it as an icon. Actually, let me log out so you can see this login. Yeah, here's the login page. It sets the icon to his message and the text for welcome back, of course. And then I use a custom text field that I've created in my components folder, which I'm going to be showing, uh, to um, to display the email and password text fields, and as well as using a custom button that I've created for the actual login button, which calls the login function as stated. And finally, there's this row at the end, which basically has just the text "we're not a member" and the register now button with a gesture detector to send the user using the on tap, of course, to the sign up function if it was tapped. Okay. Now for the sign up page is basically a similar thing. It's except it has more controllers for the confirming the password than the actual username. And also it has an on tap function to go to the sign in. And if we go here, the sign up method also creates an auth service instance and a notification service instance, which is then used to try to sign up with an email of password if both the passwords match. And if the passwords don't match, it would also show a dialog stating that passwords don't match as I shown. And then if it was successfully signed in, it will request permission, get the token, and clear all the controllers. And of course, if anything goes wrong, it would also print show an alert dialog of the actual error. Now, when it comes to the actual sign up page, which I can see show here, it's basically the same similar page when it goes to where it use the icon, the text, and the custom text fields, as my text field, in order to display, as well as the custom button over here, which calls the sign up function. And finally, the row, which I use using the login here to send the user to the login page. Now I'm just going to log in again to display the rest of the app. Okay, perfect. Now, next, I'm going to be showing off the homepage. Here, the homepage is a stateful widget because it needs to listen to the state of and and get the users and always stay updated just in case if there's new users, if a user leaves the app, etc. So first, I define here. I create instances for the chat service, which I'm going to be talking about later, the auth service and the notification service, because I'm going to be needing to use all of them, as well as create the initialization of the state for the actual page, as well as calling the Firebase notification, which is from the notification service, which I'm going to be going over as well. Here is basically the widget build for the page, and it just creates the app bar, as you can see, with the drawer as my main drawer, which I'm also going to be going over in order to show you how it works, which is basically this drawer. And finally, the build user list builds this list. And when it comes to the build user list function over here, Basically, it gets the user stream using the chat service, which gets a stream of the current users. And then if there's an error, it prints that an error has occurred. If it's still waiting, it shows a loading message. If everything is good, it will return uh, the mapped version and it will map the data and then build a user list item using this user data and then transfer that to list. Now, how will the build user item be done? Which is over here. Basically, it takes the map data and the context and it checks if it goes through all of them, making sure that the email for a specific user is not the current user that I've already used. So the current user, so if I'm using the test 1 2 account, I shouldn't see a test 1 2 in the list of users. And then I create basically the user tile, which has the text as the username, as you can see. I had it to print the UID just to check something out when I was running. And of course, here I push, if I press on any of them, I push the chat page using the user data or, sorry, the username and the UID. Else, it would just gonna be an empty container. And finally, I'm going to be showing you first the settings page, which basically is just the page over here, which has this container with the text dark mode, and you can switch between them like this, where it calls the toggle theme from the theme provider change notifier, which I went over previously in the themes folder. Moving on to the chat page, I used a stateful widget because in order to always catch if there's any changes with the chat or if a new message has been received or anything. And I defined it so it requires a receiver username and a receiver ID, which are used during the running of the application to display the username at the top. For example, if I go to test user, here's a username on the top. So I need the username to be taken as a variable in order to use it. Moving on to the actual implementation for the chat page, I first define the controllers for the message. So it's whatever I write here is taken, as well as creating the services for chat, auth, and notification instances. And I also created a global key, which is used for the scroll controller. uh, Moving on, here there's this late scroll controller, which basically is defined once the during the actual application's init state, so that's why it's late, and it puts a focus node on the message for using it saves the message focus node. This basically is the focus node that focuses on a specific point, which is mostly going to be the last message, as you can see here when it went down on the last message. To scroll down if I'm typing or if I just open the chat, it scrolls down to the bottom in order to show the latest messages. Here is the initialization state where I get the receiver token, which I get the token for the person that I'm trying to send the information to from the database in order to send them the notification later. And again, and as well, I define the scroll controller here, and I add a listener to the message node with a delayed function in order to scroll down after the messages has loaded. Now, and here I also dispose of the message controller if I ever close this page. And here's the scroll down function, which basically animates to scrolling down, scrolling to the max scroll extent, going down like this. And it just takes 1 second. Exactly. And here's the send message function, which basically I use to first check if the message is not empty. If it is not indeed, I will store it in the message variable and then clear the text in order to make sure that the text doesn't stay there for long while the actual sending process is taking place. Now, after we have this message, we will then call the send message function from the chat service, which I'm going to be showing, in order to send this message to the receiver ID. And also, I'm going to be using the getting the username from the auth service for the sender, the person that like my actual username, and using this in the send notification to send the message use it also with the sender ID and my username. So when it's received, I could use the sender ID and the username in order to open up this page. And here is the actual building for the widgets, which is basically first is the app bar, which has the username centered, and then it's just going to be a column with an expanded build messages list, which builds the list of messages, and at the bottom is the input area. The message list, as you can see, is put on expanded to make sure that it takes up most of the screen, while the build input area is always going to be at the very bottom. Moving on to the build messages list, basically it gets the user, it gets the current user's ID as the sender ID, and then uses a stream builder to get the messages from the database, so from the Firestore database, using the chat service, which I'm also going to be showing, and then checks if there's an error. It prints error occurred. If not, it prints loading, and if there's no errors at all, it would just print a list view of with using the scroll controller as the controller and have a build message item dot list, and the build message item using the docs that we have retrieved from the data and transfer that to list. And now I'm going to be showing you the build message item. As you can see here, the build message item, which takes in the document, and I then map this document as a string to dynamic, and I check if the sender is the current user. If it is the current user, then the alignment is going to be to the right, as you can see. If not, it's going to be to the left. Then I just return the container, which has the um, specific alignment left or right, and then this column with also the alignment depending on whether it's this user or not. And the children, of course, are the actual chat bubble components, which are custom, which I'm going to be showing in the components folder later. Finally, here is the input area, which basically includes an expanded text field to take most of the side to this space on the bottom of the screen, with with also which also uses the custom my text field, which similar to the ones that I used for the login function. And finally, here in the container, I have the actual icon for sending the message, which calls the send message function. Now, these are the pages. First, I'm going to be showing you the models, then going through the services that I used. Uh, in this model, this is the message model, which basically defines messages to have sender ID, sender email, receiver ID, message, and timestamp. And I also have this function to turn such things to map in order to map them if I need to get specific information or just get a JSON uh, type from the message. Now, moving on to the services, I'm going to start with the auth service. Now, going first is the auth page, which basically what it does is it's the page where the actual uh, application loads to, which checks if there's any state changes, and then it checks if the snapshot has data, which what that does is basically it checks if there's a user is logged in or not. So if it has data, that means that user is logged in, then it just goes into the home page. If not, it would go to the login or register page, which basically is the page which toggles between login and register, which I'm going to be showing in a second. Next is the auth service, which handles the Firebase authentication. and also the Firebase Firestore database instances for the user. Like for example, here I have the get current user, which returns the current user. Of course, using the instances from Firebase auth and Firebase Firestore. And I also have the get username, which basically uses the user document returned from the collection users, and using the user ID, I get this document and I get return the username in order to use it while sending a message or while getting my own username for other operations. I also have the sign in with email and password, which basically takes in the email and password, calls the sign in with email and password from the core Firebase auth package. And if there's any problems, I throw an exception. If there isn't, then we're good. And there's also the sign up one, which creates the actual user as well as creating the actual document in the Firestore database, storing the user's ID, the user's email, and his username. And finally, the sign out function, which, as said before, it deletes the user's token from the function in order to make sure that the user doesn't get a notification on his device if he is logged out. And then, of course, the auth sign out function from the Firebase auth package. Perfect. Now, continuing to the next page is the login or register, and which basically acts as a toggle between the login page. If it checks if the show login page is true, then it will show the login page. If I pressed on sign up, this would be toggled using this function, and it then would change the sign up page automatically. Now for the chat service, which is the service that I use for handling the Firestore database when it comes to the actual messages. Basically, what I do is get the user stream, which returns the snapshots from the user's collection, and map them out. Uh, and then for each user, I use the document that I get the data from the documents and save them in the user variable, and then return the user. And this is all stored in a list to be returned using the stream. Here is the send message function, which basically first gets the current user ID and email and the timestamp, and then creates the message instance using the message model, and also gets the IDs, sorts them in order to make sure that two different people will always have the same combination of ID when it comes to joining them. So this puts the IDs in a list, sorts the list, and then it will join them to, again, this was done just to make sure that two users will always have the same document for their messages. Then it will await a Firestore the Firestore function to go into the collection of chats, create a document called chatroom ID if one it hasn't been already created, go to the collection of messages and create one if one hasn't been already created, and add the new message and map it. And finally, there's the get messages, which are used to get the messages and display them here in the page for the in the chat page. Basically, again, it gets the IDs, sorts them, and joins them, and then it will get the document from the chats and get the messages collection from it and order them descendingly based on the timestamp, so they are in order, and return those snapshots, which is then used by the chat page in order to display them. Now, finally, the last service I have is the notification service, as you can see here. I'm not showing the top of the page because there I have the service account JSON stored, this contains the sensitive information when it comes to the actual Firebase Cloud Messaging API. So I what can be showing it to you, but if you have any questions to it, feel free to about it or how to get it. Feel free to contact me uh, through my GitHub link down below. Now here I basically get first define the scopes as a list because I have to use it like that later on. I also call the Flutter local notification plugins to handle local notifications. Sorry, excuse me. And then I save those service account credentials from the JSON and call this client via service account, which basically creates the auth client using Google credentials and gets the access token to this, and then returns this access token, which I will have to be using later on to send and receive notifications. Here is the initialization of local uh, notification, which basically just defines the Android settings for initialization settings for this, as well as the Darwin initialization settings for iOS, and the initialization settings for, and then here is the initialization settings for both Android and iOS are stored here, where they are just going to be inputted here that later to initialize the Flutter local notification plugin. And when it does receive a notification, it prints the response payload string. And here's show local notification, which also handles the style information. Like here's the Android details, here's the iOS details, these are the notification details, and again uses this Flutter local notification plugin to show the notification body, the message.notification dot the title, the body, the notification setting details, and the payload, which is data.body. Yeah. So basically, it takes in the remote message, which is the message received from the Firebase Cloud Messaging, and it showcases the local notification. Now, here is the request permission function, which basically creates a Firebase messaging instance. And using that instance, it will request permission using these following uh, variables, and then using these settings, sorry. And then it checks the authorization state if it's authorized, user granted permission. If not, if it's provisional, and also if not, then it did not accept the permission, and he will not be receiving notifications. Finally, here is the get token, which basically runs the Firebase messaging.instance.get token, and then saves this token in order to be using it for sending notifications. This gets the user's actual token. So if I'm using if so when I log into an application, it saves this token as I showed in the login page. It saves this token to my here, and as you can see in the save token function, it saves it to my current user ID document in the user's collection in order to always is in order to be able to receive the in order to be able to receive the actual token from sorry, the actual notifications from other users. And here's the get receiver token, which acts as the same thing, but instead it takes for the receiver ID again, and then it will set this receiver token as the actual token saved in the receiver's account. Moving on, here is the setup interacted message of build, which takes in the build context. What it does, it basically is when it gets the initial message for when, if a message has been pressed on. So if I get a message and I press on it, this is what handles it. If the message is not null, it will handle this message. If Firebase base.on message opened, is it means that there's a message that I open using like I open when I'm on the app, it will then handle the message. That's when it's on the background. And here, if the message also contains a appropriate type chat, yeah, and here is what's handled when it's in a terminated state, basically. So the notification is handled in any way it is. And here's how the notifications are handled. Basically, what they do is they push the chat page. So they open the chat page as I demonstrated, showing the sender username and the sender ID. And here is the Firebase notification function that I already stated before, which basically calls the init local notifications that I've shown previously and the setup interactive message as well, which I just shown above here. And basically then it's on when a message is received, it listens to that, and it then says that it got a message on the for this handles messages when they are on the foreground or when they are in the background. Or sorry, when they're on foreground only, the background one is the setup interactive message. So if a message is received in the foreground, it goes it prints that a message has been received and the message data. And if the message notification is not null, it will print message also contained message notification. But these are also only checks to make sure everything is running smoothly, and then it will just await show local notification, which, as I previously showed, shows the actual notification based on the device. Now, here's the send notification function, which takes in the body, the sender ID, and the username. Basically, what it does, it tries to send to post to this URI using these headers, the content type and the authorization, which uses the get access token that I have defined up there. And of course, the content type set to JSON. And basically, this then JSON encoded to include the message, the receiver token, the actual text that's going to be with the message and the body. And here is setting a few of the data to know how to handle it. Flutter, so click action is going to be Flutter notification click. The status is going to be done, and the sender ID and the sender username are going to be transferred as well with the data, so I can use them when receiving the message as I showed before, in order to actually open the chat page. And if there's any problems, of course, I just debug print this in order to see. I also have the JSON file for this over here, which stores the actual credentials for the Firebase Cloud Messaging, but I cannot show it to you again for the security. Here is also the components that I used finally. For example, here is the chat bubble component, which basically takes in the message and is current user to know the color for the message bubble and the timestamp in order to showcase it. Basically, how this works is it renders these chat bubbles over here. Well, it has the container, which stores the text and the time, and as well as outside the container, there's the date. And I also use date format or like format and the package int l in order to change the timestamp to the time that I used here. And here is the function for the widget for my main drawer, which I used here in my home page. Basically, again, it just has the actual icon and it has the button for home and the button for the settings, which transfers you to the settings. And if you press home, it just pops contacts and closes. And I also have the logout button, which calls the logout function. Moving on, we have the my button, which is basically the buttons that I used in the login and the sign up functions, which is basically just a gesture detector with a container that stores the title and the text and the on tap um, functionality for the button itself. I also have the text fields like the ones used in the login, the sign up, and the actual chat page on the bottom here, like this one. which basically here is just the decorations for them and how they works, and they take in the hint text, which is the text that's written already in them, which is says like type something, or in the login case, the email. And then there's obscure text, which asks whether the text should be hidden or not. So, for example, if I'm writing a password, this is set to true, and the text controller and the focus node, of course. And finally, the user tiles, which are the ones displaying the users here in the home page, which are also gesture detectors, and they take in the an on tab function, which renders in the chat page depending on the actual user that they pressed on. And here's just the decoration for them, and it shows the icon, and then some space, and then the text, which is taken in as the username. That is basically it when it comes to my chat application. I've covered all the points that I've worked on in this application. An important thing to also note is that in order to make sure that the permissions are correctly asked for when it comes to the application, when it comes to the notification permissions, you have to go to the Android app source, and in the main folder, there's the Android manifest. So which you have to include the important um, Android permissions here at the top to make sure that your app actually requests the permissions and actually uses them. Yep, and that's pretty much it for my chat application. Please feel free to contact me in the when in GitHub, or and also I will be having the GitHub repo link down below in the description. So if you want to check out the code for yourself, do you want to test it out, you want to uh, understand how it works, and if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me or find my email there. And thank you so much for watching.